There is an ecosystem inside your body that you cannot see, cannot feel directly, and almost never think about. It lives mainly inside your digestive tract, and it contains trillions of microorganisms. For years, scientists largely treated these microbes as passengers. Some were useful, some were harmless. Some were considered little more than unwanted guests. But that picture is changing. Researchers now know that the gut is home to a complex community of bacteria and other microorganisms that interact with food, the intestinal lining, the immune system, and each other. And there is something particularly strange about this ecosystem. It changes as we age. The question is not simply whether the gut microbiome becomes good or bad. The real mystery is why it changes, what those changes actually mean, and whether some of the health problems associated with aging may be connected to what is happening inside the gut. Because aging does not happen only to the face, the muscles, or the bones, something is changing inside the digestive system too, and scientists are only beginning to understand how much that matters. Imagine two people in their 70s. They may look relatively healthy from the outside. They may eat similar foods, but inside their digestive systems, their microbial communities could look very different. One person's gut may contain a wide variety of microbial species. Another may have a less diverse community, influenced by decades of diet, illness, medications, lifestyle, and changes in the body itself. That difference does not automatically mean one person is healthy and the other is sick. And this is an important warning from the science. There is no single microbiome that every human being should have. Researchers are still trying to determine which microbial patterns are genuinely beneficial, which are simply associated with good health, and which may be consequences of disease rather than causes. That distinction is crucial, because the gut microbiome has become one of the most exciting areas of medical research. It has also become one of the easiest areas to oversimplify. You may have heard that your gut bacteria control your immune system, or your metabolism, or your mood, or even your brain. Some of these connections have biological evidence behind them, but others are still being investigated. So to understand the real story, we need to go back to the beginning. What exactly is living inside us? The human digestive tract contains a vast community of microorganisms. Together, these organisms form what scientists call the gut microbiota. The word microbiome is often used more broadly to describe the microorganisms and their genetic material. They are not all doing the same thing. Some help break down substances that our own digestive enzymes cannot fully process. Certain microbes can produce compounds that interact with the cells lining the intestine. Others interact with the immune system, and some can potentially become harmful when the surrounding environment changes. The important point is that these microorganisms do not exist independently of us. They live in an environment created partly by what we eat, how quickly food moves through the gut, the condition of the intestinal lining, and countless other factors. It is a relationship, and relationships can change. As people grow older, their bodies undergo many changes at the same time. Muscle mass may decline, physical activity may decrease, appetite may change. Dental problems can make certain foods harder to eat. Some people develop chronic illnesses, others take medications for years, and diet can become narrower. All of these changes can influence the gut environment. This creates the first major clue. Perhaps aging itself is not the only reason the microbiome changes. Perhaps aging changes the circumstances in which the microbiome has to live. Consider medication. Older adults are more likely than younger adults to use multiple medications, sometimes over many years. Some medicines can influence the gastrointestinal system directly. Antibiotics are an obvious example because they can dramatically alter bacterial communities. But researchers are also studying the effects of other commonly used medications on the microbiome. That does not mean these medicines are harmful. A medication can be medically necessary and still influence the microorganisms living in the gut. The relationship is much more complicated than simply labeling a drug good or bad. Then there is diet. The bacteria living in your gut do not eat exactly what you eat. They feed on what reaches different parts of the digestive tract. Certain types of dietary fiber can be used by microbes to produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids. These compounds are being studied for their effects on the intestinal environment, immune signaling, and metabolism. But again, researchers are still working out exactly which microbial changes matter most in humans. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. For a long time, scientists focused heavily on identifying individual bacteria. Which species is present? Which species is missing? But the gut may not work like a list of individual players. It may work more like an ecosystem. Remove one species, and another may fill part of its role. Change the available food, and the entire community may shift. Change the environment, and different microorganisms may become more successful. That means the important question may not be, do you have the right bacteria? It may be, what is this entire microbial community doing? That question becomes particularly important in older adults. Some studies have found associations between aging and changes in microbial diversity or composition. But the results are not identical across every population. Geography matters, diet matters, lifestyle matters, health status matters, and perhaps most importantly, researchers are discovering that healthy older adults can have very different microbiomes from one another. So there may not be one universal pattern of a healthy elderly microbiome. Instead, there may be several, and that creates a problem for anyone looking for a simple answer. If the microbiome changes with age, does that change cause disease? Or does disease cause the microbiome to change? Or are both being influenced by something else? This is one of the biggest unanswered questions in the field. Take inflammation. As people age, some experience a gradual increase in low-level inflammation. Scientists sometimes call this inflammaging. The gut microbiome has been investigated as one possible contributor to this process. Changes in the intestinal ecosystem may influence immune signaling. Changes in the intestinal barrier may also affect how the body interacts with substances produced by microbes. But association is not proof of causation. A study can find that two things occur together without proving that one caused the other. This is where the investigation becomes much more interesting. Because if the gut microbiome is simply changing as a passenger of aging, then changing it might not dramatically change health. But if certain microbial changes actively contribute to disease, then the gut could become something very different. Not just a place where food is digested, a potential biological pathway connecting aging with multiple systems throughout the body. And researchers are now investigating exactly that possibility. Could the gut influence immune aging? Could microbial changes affect metabolism? Could they contribute to frailty? Could signals traveling between the gut and brain help explain some changes in neurological health? These questions are being studied in laboratories, population studies, and clinical research. Some findings are promising, others are still preliminary, and some of the most exciting claims have not yet been proven in humans. That is why the real story is not that scientists have discovered a hidden organ controlling everything. They have discovered something more subtle, an ecosystem that changes throughout life. An ecosystem shaped by what we eat, the medicines we take, our physical activity, our illnesses, and the environment inside our bodies. And the older we become, the more complicated that ecosystem may become. But there is one problem we have not solved yet. If the gut microbiome really changes with age, what actually causes the change? Is aging itself responsible? Or are decades of diet, medication, inactivity, disease, and other changes quietly reshaping the ecosystem long before we notice anything is wrong? And if we could separate those factors, we might finally discover whether the aging gut is simply a reflection of getting older, or one of the places where the aging process itself is being written. That is where the next part of the investigation begins. So if the gut microbiome changes as we age, what is actually driving that change? The answer may be less dramatic than the headlines suggest. There is no single switch that flips when someone turns 60 or 70. Instead, the microbiome appears to be shaped by a lifetime of small changes: diet, medication, movement, illness, living environment, and the gradual changes that happen throughout the digestive system itself. This is important because it changes the question. We are not simply asking whether aging changes gut bacteria. We are asking whether the changes we associate with aging are actually caused by age itself, or by everything that tends to happen during those later decades. Consider diet first. As people get older, food choices can become narrower. Some people eat less because appetite decreases. Others avoid certain foods because chewing becomes difficult. Some may rely more heavily on processed or convenient foods. And when the variety of food reaching the gut changes, the microbial ecosystem can change with it. This is one reason researchers have become interested in dietary diversity. Different types of plant foods provide different compounds that gut microbes can use. But once again, this does not mean that simply eating one superfood will rebuild a healthy microbiome. The human gut is far too complicated for that. The microbes themselves interact, they compete, they cooperate, they produce chemicals that other microbes can use. It is closer to an ecosystem than a collection of independent organisms. And ecosystems respond to their environment. That brings us to physical activity. Older adults who remain physically active often show different microbiome patterns from people who are more sedentary. But researchers face the same problem here. Does exercise directly change the microbiome? Or are physically active people also eating differently, maintaining different body compositions, taking different medications, and having different health conditions? The answer may involve all of these factors at once. This is why observational studies can reveal fascinating associations, but cannot always tell us which factor came first. Then there are medications. Antibiotics can cause major shifts in the gut microbial community, but scientists are also studying other commonly used medications and their relationships with the microbiome. For older adults taking several medicines, the combined effect may be particularly difficult to understand. Yet this is not an argument against necessary treatment. A medication can provide enormous health benefits while also changing the microbial environment. The important question is not whether every change is harmful. It is whether certain changes matter for long-term health. And this leads to one of the most intriguing possibilities. The microbiome may help explain why some older adults remain remarkably resilient while others become frail. Frailty is not simply getting old. It is a state involving reduced physical reserve, weakness, slower movement, and greater vulnerability to illness. Researchers have found associations between frailty and differences in gut microbial communities. Some studies suggest that certain microbial patterns may be linked with inflammation, muscle function, or nutritional status. But there is a major scientific problem. A person who becomes frail may eat less, move less, lose muscle, take more medication, and experience more illness. Every one of those changes can affect the gut. So the microbiome might be part of the cause, or it might partly reflect what is already happening elsewhere in the body, or both could be true. This is why scientists are increasingly interested in longitudinal research. Instead of looking at one person at one moment, researchers follow people over time. That allows them to ask a much more powerful question: what changed first? And that question matters enormously. Because if a microbial change appears years before a health problem develops, it becomes more interesting as a possible contributor. If the microbial change appears only after the disease develops, it may be more likely to be a consequence. But even then, biology rarely follows a straight line. The relationship can work in both directions. The gut can influence the body, and the body can influence the gut. One of the most fascinating examples is the immune system. A large part of the body's immune activity is closely connected with the digestive tract. The intestinal lining forms an important boundary between the outside world and the inside of the body. Food, microbes, and countless molecules pass through the digestive system every day. The immune system has to constantly decide what should be tolerated and what requires a response. The gut microbiome is part of this environment. Researchers are investigating whether age-related changes in microbial communities may contribute to altered immune signaling. But again, the evidence is still evolving. We should not turn a promising biological pathway into a proven explanation for every disease associated with aging. The same caution applies to the brain. The so-called gut-brain connection has become one of the most talked-about areas of microbiome research. Scientists have identified several ways the gut and brain can communicate. Signals can travel through nerves. Immune molecules can influence both systems. Microbial products can enter biological pathways that affect the nervous system. And the digestive tract itself produces many signaling molecules. But does this mean your gut bacteria determine your mood or memory? No. The science is nowhere near that simple. Animal studies have produced intriguing results. Human studies are providing clues, but many questions remain unanswered. And this distinction between possibility and proof is essential. The microbiome is not a magic explanation for aging. It is one piece of a much larger biological puzzle. That may be disappointing if you were looking for one hidden cause, but it is actually more interesting, because the gut may sit at the intersection of several systems. Food enters, microbes process parts of it, the intestinal lining responds, the immune system monitors the environment, metabolic signals circulate, and the brain receives information from the digestive system. A change in one part can potentially influence another. This helps explain why scientists are studying the microbiome in conditions ranging from metabolic disease to inflammatory disorders and age-related decline. But there is another major question. If the microbiome is involved in these processes, can we actually change it? This is where probiotics, fermented foods, dietary interventions, and other microbiome-based approaches enter the conversation. And the evidence is much more complicated than the marketing suggests. Some interventions can change microbial composition, but changing the microbiome is not automatically the same as improving health. A microbial change can occur without producing a meaningful clinical benefit, and a product that helps one person may not have the same effect in another. That is because each person's microbial ecosystem is different. It is shaped by a lifetime of experiences. This may eventually lead medicine toward a more personalized approach. Instead of asking, "What is the best probiotic for everyone?" researchers may eventually ask, "What does this person's microbiome look like? What is it doing? And what intervention would actually help?" But that future is still developing. For now, many microbiome treatments remain an active area of research rather than established solutions for aging itself. And this brings us back to the original mystery. Why does your gut change so much as you get older? The most honest answer is that age is only part of the story. The microbiome changes because the environment around it changes. Food changes, movement changes, medications change, health conditions change, the immune system changes, and the digestive tract itself changes. Some microbial changes may be harmless. Some may reflect healthier or less healthy lifestyles. Some may contribute to disease, and some may simply be biological differences between individuals. Scientists are still working out which is which. What we can say with greater confidence is that the gut microbiome is not static. It is dynamic. It responds to its environment, and aging provides decades of opportunity for that environment to change. That gives us a more realistic picture of the gut. Not a mysterious organ controlling every aspect of health, not a collection of good bacteria that can be fixed with one product, but a living ecosystem that interacts continuously with the human body. And perhaps the biggest discovery is not that the microbiome changes with age. It is that researchers are beginning to understand how deeply connected those changes may be to the rest of the body. The gut may not explain aging, but it could help us understand why aging looks so different from one person to another. Why one older adult remains active and resilient while another becomes frail. why some people maintain metabolic health while others develop chronic disease, and why the same food, medication, or illness can produce very different outcomes in different people. The investigation is far from over. In fact, scientists are still debating which microbial signatures actually matter, which are simply markers of health, and whether changing them can reliably improve long-term outcomes. For now, the evidence supports a more careful conclusion. Your gut is changing as you age. But the story is not necessarily one of decline. It is a story of adaptation. And that leaves us with something more hopeful than the idea of a damaged gut. The ecosystem inside you is constantly responding to the world around it. Understanding that ecosystem may eventually give medicine another way to understand healthy aging. Not by trying to stop aging, but by discovering why some bodies remain resilient for so much longer. And that may be the real mystery scientists are now trying to solve.